It's Hump Day, folks. Welcome to today's show. The Tech Town Square is live. We got an awesome episode for you guys today. Before we do that, a few housekeeping things. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and everywhere you get your stuff. Matt Lee says, good evening to the great and awesome Matt, who's joining us on tonight's show. Before we get started on today's show, on behalf of myself and Eddie, all opinions we express on the show are our own, don't reflect any organizations we're affiliated or associated with. Just so you guys know, this disclaimer right here essentially says we can say whatever we want, and you can't say anything about it. Right, Eddie?
Beautiful. Yes, definitely. And the other thing you can do, since we have an American-Russian guest, I was going to go out and get a vodka today in your honor. It was just one of those days where it was like 7 a.m. till right now. I got a scotch. And so, yes, thanks for the disclaimer. I'll enjoy my scotch. And here's to you, Jack.
Well, I envy you. Is it single malt?
Oh, definitely, my friend. It's a Dalmore 12-year. I've got an Irish last name, but I like the Scots.
I was at a bourbon tasting at 4 o'clock today, a Zoom bourbon tasting. So I will say that there's a few bottles of bourbon right behind me right now that, depending on how this show goes, might get cracked open again. So we'll see.
Matt knows our guest, I see, because he added one more nationality in there. Throw that one up.
American, Russian, German guest. So without further ado, let me bring up our guest here, because you guys hear from Eddie and I all the time, but we've got a really, really awesome show. Joining us today is Jack Barsky, who is born in Germany, was shipped to us, to the lovely, greatest country on planet Earth, USA, courtesy of a very nice organization known to many in Russia as the KGB, also known as the FSB today, as an undercover sleeper agent for about 10 years. And he loved America so much that he said, I'm done with the KGB. I'm going to become a productive American citizen. He was featured in May of 15 in 60 Minutes under the title The Spy Among Us. If you haven't gotten his book, you should. Deep Undercover was released in March 2017. It's available in, I think, 3 or 4 languages now. And he's done over 100 media appearances. The guy's just one of the smart, brilliant people we have here. And he's gracing us with his presence. Jack, welcome to the program.
That was a humbling introduction, but I want to add to this one more item that I'm really very proud of, because it should get me into the Guinness Book of World Records, even though they need measurements. I am the only active undercover KGB agent who ever graduated as valedictorian from a United States business school.
There you go. Fantastic. Well, definitely go get that Guinness Book of World Records as well. Just add that to your repertoire. And and tell us too. So, sipping a Macallan, very nice. Man after my own heart there, Matt. I love it.
And the awesome Heather goes, James, you're wearing the wrong shirt. No, I'm not. If you haven't donated to Tiltify to support the Wounded Warrior Project, I am still in the right shirt. You get it one time only, until you hit 5,000. Then you get it for a whole week.
There you go. He'll be wearing the shirt that I'm currently wearing. I'll ship this one to him, and I won't launder it.
I don't think you and I are the same size, Eddie.
No. Inside jokes. All of them.
I tell you, lots of jokes on this show, Jack. So I want to hear your story, because you're a friend associate of James. You guys have known each other for a while. You're both down south there, but this is our first time meeting live, as it were, virtually. So I would just love to hear the kind of, Cole's Notes version of your story. So why don't you give us the quick rundown?
All right, I'm going to be really fast, and I'm going to try not to repeat myself. So I was born 4 years after the end of World War II in a very remote, godforsaken corner of Germany, which that part of Germany it was Russian occupied. It became East Germany, the German Democratic Republic, communist regime. I grew up in a village. There wasn't much there. But the only thing that the communists did really well, they educated us very well. And I did well education-wise, so I was moved up to gymnasium to a city. And then I got to go to a university town. And there I excelled. I graduated with a master's degree in chemistry. And just 2 years prior to that graduation, the KGB introduced themselves. It was all very, very informal. initially, we want to talk to you about. The first fellow who talked to me was German. And then he introduced me to a Russian guy, and it took about a year and a half for a mutual feeling out. They were clearly looking at me for something special. And so they needed to figure out whether I have what it takes.
Did you know they were KGB when they first introduced themselves to you?
No, the second time. When the German introduced me to a Russian, he said, "We are working with our Soviet friends." I knew it was KGB. Man, I hit the big time, KGB. The Russians were our friends, and the KGB, I think I can make that claim, was probably the most powerful organization on the planet at that time. They had 500,000 employees full time, and they were all in some kind of law enforcement, espionage, what have you. And that did not count military intelligence. GRU was completely separate. So anyway, and so after about a year and a half, this fellow most likely wrote a lot of reports about me. I was introduced to, I think, may have been the number one guy in the KGB in Berlin, who then very bluntly asked me the question, "So, are you in or not?" Geez, I wasn't prepared for that. And he gave me overnight to make up my mind. Well, I had a sleepless night, and eventually what really tipped the scale was my adventurous nature. I wanted to be one of those East German James Bonds. We had them too,
Right.
What was the name though? Because it wasn't James Bond. What's the East German James Bond?
That was, I forgot what he was called, but there was a TV series with and you may actually know this actor who's the only East German actor who made it in Hollywood, Armin Müller-Stahl. Armin Müller-Stahl. Anyway, he played one of those guys, who would go to West Germany, and he did good with the ladies, and he lived a rich life while trying to undermine the society that actually allowed him to live that rich life.
Well, so Jack, let me ask you this then. So when they said, "Are you in or are you out?" and you had, one night to decide, what was the in or out? To become a spy? So was that was what the offer was?
Yes, to sign up with the KGB or say, "No, I'm not going to do it." That was, at that moment, I could have said no without any negative repercussions.
Right. Yeah, because you can't get out once you're in, kind of thing, right? So
you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So what was your mentality to the West at the time? What did you think of the Western world?
Well, it's you probably know that we were bombarded with propaganda and indoctrination and brainwashing from kindergarten on. So what was totally ingrained in me, I knew that the standard of living in the West was higher, but I also knew why, because they exploited the poor third world nations. They stole the bananas from Honduras and Guatemala and so forth. So that, and the other thing is what we knew, and which was completely false knowledge, that at the time workers were still being exploited. Now, in the beginning of capitalism, the working class really did not do well, but I was disabused of that notion very quickly when I started living in the U.S.
So that's really interesting because, so if I understand this correctly, the communist mantra is for the people, but so the narrative of the people are being exploited fits perfectly with rah. So really, the West was the enemy. This was the big evil enemy. And when you had to make that decision overnight, did you think, I'm going to destroy the enemy, or I'm going to be engaged in disinformation campaigns, or?
No, I knew that I was going to be sent. Initially, it was West Germany, because at that time, nobody, including me, knew that I had a talent for languages. So I was going to go to West Germany and make sure that those damn Nazi bastards would not, be able to take us over, because that was the notion. That was the wall had been built already, and unfortunately for the West, there were some ex-Nazis in West German government, most notably General Reinhard Gehlen, who was military intelligence under Hitler, who became the head of the Bundesnachrichtendienst, the CIA of West Germany. So we had some propaganda facts that would convince people like me that they were Nazis, and they were really, they were just the neo-Nazis, and they were supported by the United States. So the whole thing is they were going to take us over and eventually defeat the Soviet Union.
Isn't that how propaganda works? There's an element of truth, and then you spin the narrative all the way around that, right?
Yeah, but that's also why communism invests so much in education, because from a very young age they essentially indoctrinate you with that communist mantra for the people, even though the last thing the communism is for the people. It's really for the ruling class.
And the most interesting thing in that respect is we had a very, very strong focus on science. I looked at my curriculum in my senior year in high school. Half of it was science and math. But when it came to this quote unquote social sciences, which to me is a misnomer anyway, we were taught scientific Marxism-Leninism. There was the future of the world to be communist was as logical and scientifically supported as the fact that, the formula of alcohol is C2H5O.
Yeah, no kidding.
So Jack, I kind of want to, for a lot of our viewers, they're very silent so far because they're clinging on, as Matt would say, they're silently hanging on every word you say. And disabused is a word from my vernacular, and I believe that. The element of truth and spoon the sensationalism from Patrick. All some comments here as we try to incorporate that. But, I wanted to bring you on for one thing. We often hear so much about Russia. And right now, for the last 4.5 years, all we've heard here in the media is Russia, 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 Russia. I'm under the impression, as someone who's been to Russia, who knows and speaks to Russian people on a regular basis, that we probably have more in common with the Russian people than we do with a lot of other nations as a people. What's the Russian mentality like? And what should people really know about Russian mentality before we start believing a lot of the media hype and talking points about how evil Russia is?
I speak from experience. I spent 2 years in Moscow, 2 full years. And I can tell you one thing, that the Russian people are lovely people. They will take you into their home. They will feed you. They are very romantic. I like their music. And there's nothing wrong with the Russian individuals. They're really, really very likable individuals. And as compared to Germans are stiff. Americans are more friendly and warm, and so are Russians. So there's a lot to like both ways. And in those days, I was in Moscow in the late 70s. There was a phenomenal fascination with America and Americans. We had one time there was a theater group that came out of the United States, and then there was a bunch of country singer with the lead being Roy Clark. My God, you couldn't get a ticket for that. I was able to because I was KGB. And I think everybody in the audience was KGB.
500,000 of you.
Love the Russians, and they have these elaborate long dinners, like with 10 courses, and there would be after every course or before every course there would be some super cool vodka that would be served. And then you make the rounds and everybody has to say a toast. And guess what? Because of the fatty food, nobody ever got drunk. So they're lovely people, and they're phenomenally underserved. They were underserved by the communist society, and they're now underserved by this oligarchy because there's a relatively thin upper crust that includes, the intelligentsia and entertainers and so forth. And underneath, there's still a lot of poverty, a lot. You don't have to go too far outside of Moscow to find villages that don't have electricity.
Really? Wow. No kidding. Hey.
So that's a great point. Danielle says, I'm not concerned about the people, it's the government agenda. But let's talk a little bit about the government agenda, because, you know, Russia is not an economic superpower. It's nowhere near being an economic superpower, right? And at the end of the day, war is fought economically before it's fought on the battlefield. Now, Russia, like you said pre-show, has half of the world's nuclear weapons. So we kind of have to find a way to get along. But talk a little bit about the Russian mentality around the regional goals.
Okay, but before I get there, let me talk about the nuclear arsenal. We as Americans do not have an interest in destabilizing that regime that we don't like. Because if this becomes a chaotic, anarchic kind of society, God forbid where the nuclear weapons land.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you haven't seen any movie about weapons trade, it typically involves Russian Jews selling something that they've gotten from Russia. In fact, with the fall of the Soviet Union, there were so many weapons dealers that were essentially taking old Soviet weaponry and selling it across the world. So imagine what would happen in today's world.
Yes. So anyway, but let's talk about the Russian mentality as far as the Russian state is concerned. Historically, Russia exists since sort of 1500 in that neighborhood. And from day one, they have been attacked from the east, from the north, from the west, and the south. So they developed this siege mentality. They developed this idea that the world is against them. And so for centuries, including today, one of the main goals of the Russian state is to create some kind of a buffer zone around them. So that's why the Soviet Union surrounded the Russian center by, the Baltic states and Ukraine and the south, the mountain states, so to speak.
Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, and so forth.
And that hasn't changed. It was always the same. One other thing about the Russian mentality, it's and they have an inferiority complex. Russia is still fundamentally, the Russian soul is the soul of a peasant. They have, you see, when the industrialization was a forced industrialization beginning under Lenin and then under Stalin, this was not an organic growth of an industry. And so the connection of the Russian individuals to Mother Earth, to Mother Russian, is extremely strong. And the inferiority complex has, as far as I know, goes at least back to a couple of hundred years. And as you may know, for the longest time, the official language at the Tsar's court was French. And there are a number of German words and totally German words in the Russian language that have to do with engineering. And that inferiority complex, combined with the fear of aggression from the outside, allows somebody like Putin to stay in power and manipulate the population to an extent that they actually still vote for him honestly. I don't think the elections are very, very much manipulated. There's some hanky-panky here and there, but they love their strongman.
Really? So what I'm interested in then, on that note, today we have the internet, right? So back when you were being recruited, no internet. So I can completely understand the West is the big evil empire. We've got to do something like that, manipulating, stealing bananas in, Costa Rica. So, okay, today though, Google. So from a guy that's never been to Russia, this is such a simpleton's perspective. Why don't they Google search? The people have this peasant mentality to realize that, you know what? The West is not the enemy. Let's unite. Let's be a family. I don't know, something along those lines. I mean, there's a difference between when you were recruited versus today's information access.
Well, in my time, there was a clear dividing line. There was communism and there was capitalism. And only one could wind up a winner. This world is a little more complex, and I don't think you Google yourself out of a peasant mentality.
If you could, there'd be no peasants left. Sure.
No, it's just I don't know if that's possible, but it looks like it's in the genes, and clearly if you were to ask halfway decent educated Russians, they all would want to live in America. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's no, like the Great Chinese Firewall, there's no great manipulation of the internet in Russia, is there?
I don't believe so. China has it, but in Russia, you're reasonably free to get information, and there's a lot of Westerners in and out of Russia. I mean, there's a lot of people who do business with these oligarchs because that's where the money is in Russia.
Right.
So go ahead, Eddie.
Well, I was going to say, I read Bill Bowder's book, Red Notice, a few years ago. I don't know if you heard of that one. So this was a guy that went there and traded, made $1 billion, right?
I read it.
With his life. And so that was the time when these oligarchs were created, correct? When the Iron Curtain came down, you had, what was his name? Yeltsin, right? So Yeltsin's gone, Iron Curtain comes down. All of a sudden, all these state-owned, so for the audience's sake, these state-owned assets became privatized, kind of, but individuals took over them, didn't they? And I think these were mostly powerful ex-KGB people, and they turned into overnight billionaires. Have I understood that correctly?
Okay, you're onto something here. I give you the Cliff's Note version. Mm-hmm. By the way, I read Bill Browder as well, and it's a really great book. But so this is what happened, and the Americans had something to do with it. There were a lot of American consultants. I know of one who is still alive, a prominent professor, emeritus from Southern California Republican, Pepperdine University. I forgot for the time being, I forgot his name. But they went there not knowing the culture and the society, and advised the Russian government how to privatize. So what they did, they issued certificates, like stock certificates, for all the publicly owned big companies. And guess what? Most of those peasants didn't know what to do with their certificates. So the ones in the know, and they were most likely people who had some exposure to the West, therefore KGB had the upper hand. They bought this pennies to the dollar, and that's how very quickly the economic power concentrated into the hands of a couple of dozen people, the oligarchs. Yep.
And am I right to say they are running the country pretty much? Them and Putin, they're the ones that control?
They're running the country, but only if they play nice with Putin. If they don't, they get in trouble. A couple of them had to flee to England because Putin has one thing that they don't have, and that's the military and the intelligence service.
And the judiciary as well. Putin has the judiciary, so they can trump up a case, send you to court, make it seem legitimate, convict you. Yep. And Putin uses the judiciary for a lot of different reasons. One of the very interesting things that have come out of Russia, and Putin said this, I believe, 4 or 5 years ago, that the next dominant in the world will be the country that
AI
that really wins AI. Russia's fascination with science and math is known. I mean, chess is a huge Russian, perspective. But talk a little bit about AI.
Me?
Well, talk a little bit about the Russian view of technology and the domination.
This is interesting how this changed. In the mid '80s, I was employed by an insurance company in information technology, and I told my bosses there in Moscow that I had access to the health records of about 15 million Americans, among them employees, all the way up to the CEO of, military industrial type companies, companies that make planes and weapons and so forth. They said, okay. And they had no idea of the value of that kind of information. Nothing. That changed. And then, and that's in the same time, they started telling me, there's this thing is called internet. Maybe you want to take a look at whether we can use it. So they were clueless at the time. In the late 80s, I finally I met a guy who was from a different department. I was in what's it called? Now I forget the word. It's like a department, illegals, right? That fellow was from a different department, and he sat me down. He said, "You know what? We're losing the race, the technological race. Whatever you can, steal whatever you can, hardware, software, blah, blah, blah." So it started the evolution and a recognition that they needed to really, really focus on technology. And they had the brains for it. As James said, the schools in the cities in Russia were excellent, and they taught a lot of math and science and so forth. And I think they caught up and may have taken the lead. I mean, they're really focusing on AI. Don't get me started. AI is a misnomer. Until a computer will tell you that, no, I'm not going to do this thing, and that wasn't programmed, I don't believe in AI. It's not intelligence.
It's a good way to look at it. Yeah. Yeah, it's machine learning. I refer to it as machine learning.
Yes,
right?
no,
Yes.
but so right now we have narrow AI. I want to get to some comments. Right now what we have, and I think, Jack, I brought it up at the event we were at together a few weeks ago, was the idea that when people talk about AI right now, they're not really talking about AI, they're talking about narrow AI. And narrow AI is the basic function of AI. We do have AI, but it's not AI in the form of what you look at the definition of artificial intelligence. It's what we call narrow AI, meaning it's some artificial. It's predominantly still as stupid as a human. And so,
Still
it does that stuff.
Then commands, correct.
Correct. But Russia is onto something. And I have a story I want Jack to share with us here in just a second. I want to get to some comments, though. So I want to start here with Matt. He says, we have the internet overall, as in we, maybe the U.S., but we're seeing a lot of countries now build their own intranets, too. I mean, Russia disconnected from the internet for a whole day last year as an exercise.
Discussion of the splinternet over here, too, right? People keep talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah, but here you don't have to worry about that. Facebook and Twitter take care of that for you.
Right.
Eddie, the consummate envoy.
Patty, yeah.
Matt says China has it dialed in. They blocked TLS 1.3 after a DEF CON demo. They run a tight, oppressive ship. Yes, they do.
Can you interpret that, actually, James? What is TLS? What's 1.3?
So TLS is the protocols across the internet. So it's essentially the internet encryption protocol, the standard protocol.
And the DEF CON demo?
Yeah, so China essentially dialed it in. They blocked TLS 1.3 in China after the DEF CON demo because they realized that they couldn't really
the DEF CON demo, right? The DEF CON, the conference. Gotcha. Okay,
yes, the DEF CON
thanks, Matt.
conference demo.
Good man. All right.
I'm glad Matt and I connected this morning, so me and him can align how I translate the stuff that he writes. Gretchen, thank you for tuning in, Gretchen. I believe narrow perspective is a fault of all, even some Americans. We must always be critical thinkers to thrive in a global future environment. Indeed, very well.
Hence the consummate envoy, yes.
Anatoly says, didn't really go as much as Jack mentioned. Most oligarchs actually bartered for most assets initially. And I think that was true in the communist economy, in the commune economy of Russia early on, was it not? Before real commerce was the idea of bartering and trading goods.
Oh, absolutely. Even in East Germany, there was a black market like you wouldn't believe. You would steal from companies and then trade for scarce goods with other people who stole from their companies.
Right.
Yeah. Matt talks about not general AI to my AI comment. So when we look at the kind of approach of Russia towards technology and how they wanted to catch up and how today they're caught up, one of the things we see a lot is, the focus on Russia as almost the greatest threat to America. Is Russia the greatest threat to this nation, Jack?
Well, I would say no, simply because I don't see the Soviet Union had the mentality that they would take over the planet, because that was communism versus capitalism. One of them could win, and one of them was going to win, and it was the communist system. I think the Russian state went back to that siege mentality and just making sure that they can maintain what they have and maybe expand it a little bit. I don't see a strong expansionary drive. And Putin is not stupid, and whoever is going to follow him, they know that economically they're just about as strong as Texas or maybe California. By comparison, they're not even in the top 10 of nations in terms of gross national product, and so that also shows itself. But by the way they run their intelligence services, they're not as well financed as in the Soviet years. They're sending a lot of amateurs out. They're sending a lot of ill-trained folks out because they just don't have the means. So they got to like hunker down and try to maintain what they got, and that's enough for the ruling class. So and I keep saying that the only reason we really have to focus on Russia is that they still have half the nuclear weapons on the planet, just about half.
So when you say that they're sending people out that are perhaps, more immature, let's just put it that way, are you talking about spies, like actual residents, people coming over to different countries to spy?
Yep.
Is that okay? So now, of course, we have the internet, and you can spy online. You can sit at home and just start typing with a keyboard. I'm very interested in disinformation campaigns. There was a lot of rhetoric in 2016 after President Trump got in saying it was all manipulation by the Russians. Now, again, as the beginning of this program, when we spoke about disinformation, right, there's tiny little bits of truth, and then we spin stories around them. Just give us your take on what happened with election interference, if there was any. What are your thoughts?
Well, let's go back to the beginning. What we call in the business active measures is spreading disinformation in an enemy country goes back, let me see, 60, 70 years. In the beginning, the KGB and its forerunners would use media, print media primarily, and then maybe radio and eventually maybe TV to seed some bad information. The two most famous examples are number one, that the AIDS virus was concocted in a CIA lab, and number two was that J. Edgar Hoover was a secret cross-dresser. That was believed by a lot of people.
Wow, it's still believed by a lot of people. In fact, it went into that J. Edgar Hoover movie, right?
But it's not true.
If they only knew that it was Bill Clinton.
You made me choke on my scotch, James. Right, that's amazing, because so many people still think that's true, and we're talking about educated, important people.
And that's not an opinion of mine. There's this. There's what I call the Bible of information about the KGB. This is based on a ton of materials smuggled out from by a KGB archivist. He was in charge of moving the archive from Moscow to outside to their new location, and he hated the Soviet state, and so he took over the years. He took notes and he smuggled them out, and eventually he had several suitcases full of notes that he shared with the MI6, the Brits, in 1992. And based on that, there's 2 books were written, and what's in those books is based on fact that came out of KGB archives. And this was one of the Hoover and the CIA was clearly documented how it got into the open. I think at least one of them started out by placing the information into with a friendly journalist, sort of a socialist type, who wrote for a magazine that was acceptable to the Western world, and then from there just took over and took off.
Man, it just seems so easy to manipulate entire countries. I mean, does it seem shockingly easy to you that people would believe this kind of nonsense?
Yes, unfortunately, particularly when you're talking about what's going on in the world today and in the Western world, there are so many idiotic rumors flying about left and right. There's no more critical thinking, and it isn't just the internet; it's everything.
What would you suggest are some of the rumors that might, you're not saying that they are, but they might have been or would typically have been started by, KGB as active measures that we're seeing today?
It's hard to quantify, but what we do know that that the Russians have a pretty strong presence in social media. And what they're doing nowadays, they built what I call the third generation of illegal agents, and these are fake personas on the internet. There's this one individual by the name of what was her name? Bertha Malone. Bertha Malone is documented, got about 1 million hits within a couple of days until I think Facebook canceled her out. Now, if you want to go and look for Bertha Malone now, there's 31 Bertha Malones on Facebook. So who was it? And is she still there? Who knows? But they make them now, and there is an army of programmers and AI scientists that are working in an institution in St. Petersburg called the Internet Research Agency. They're not part of the government. They're working for some oligarch who is friends with Putin.
Right, so that's mystifying to me. Why does an oligarch want to interfere in the Western world, right? They're making billions of dollars in the oil fields of Russia. Just go away.
Okay, so I got to speculate a little bit here. The oligarchs are still Russians. They still have a loyalty to the Russian country. Number one, and number two, they like where they are. I mean, they can do anything with their money. They can go to the West. They can have their kids educated in the United States at Ivy League schools and so forth. Yeah. Why not? They're doing well. And going out there and competing in a Western style economy, they might not do so well.
Right, that's really interesting. Yeah, it was in the preamble we were chatting, and James brought up, it was in the Mueller reports. I also have seen it in a documentary where General Nakasone of the NSA, I still think he's the head of cyber command in the NSA, said that in 2014, the Internet Research Agency, so this agency that I didn't know up until now is owned by oligarchs, their number one disinformation campaign was Black Lives Matter. This was in 2014, setting up personas on Facebook, and my understanding is they've set up a group on Facebook for, I don't know, we love puppies, whatever, and thousands of people would go to it. Right, and then another one with we love kittens. And then they would switch those to Black Lives Matter, we hate, we love, right? And then just watch the people start warring against each other.
No, I think this is probably a little more subtle. You start, injecting some initially innocent comments, and before you know it, and you spread it widely, and before you know it, things take on a life of their own, and then you need to drink eight glasses of water every day to stay healthy. That becomes public knowledge, and so all these false narratives about certain individuals who were victimized by white policemen, black guys. They're still being believed, and they have such stick-to-itiveness. It's totally amazing. You can't argue with people because they shut themselves out. They built their own echo chamber, which does not allow information in that would destroy what they believe in.
Yeah, it's so.
But that's very interesting, because if we look at the last 14 months in COVID, right? Russia wasn't really honest about what was going on in COVID. In fact, as reports were coming out, they were getting censored by the Russian government, essentially not allowing you to see the full scale of COVID. I don't think until today we know what the full scale of COVID was in Russia. Would that be an accurate assessment?
At the beginning, they claimed they had next to nothing. In the meantime, they had major problems.
Right, they were building field hospitals, huge tent cities on the outside of Moscow and at airports, and huge parking garages and so forth. I read a very interesting story, and I watched it on Monday. I believe it was Sunday or Monday, where tourists from Europe who can't get vaccinated are traveling now to Russia to get the Sputnik 5 vaccination. And it's a 2,000 euro per person package. And they fly you into Moscow, they put you in a hotel, they give you the Sputnik, they treat you for a day or two, then they send you home, and then they fly you back 3 weeks later to get the second dose of the Sputnik. Again, kind of same procedure, and send you back. And Europe is so short on vaccines that you have Europeans that are going out and actually flying to Russia to do this.
Yeah, it's just amazing how poorly that vaccination is managed in European countries, particularly in my old country, Germany. It just blows my mind that they barely reach 10% when the United States is at 35%.
Yeah, it is. I want to get to some comments here because people have been going off. Matt adds to his previous DEF CON comment, you can hide the real destination beyond the content and delivery network for command and control servers easily in TLS 1.3. China simply blocked it, just like Jinping killed systematically SOX 5 proxy, another mean to escape the Great Firewall like Iron Shield. That's specifically talking about China's Great Chinese Firewall. I meant said Russian. Mm-hmm. Anatoly has my favorite comment of the night. Only in imagination and in media. I work with Eastern European and Russian dev teams, and there's no real fear of the U.S., and neither is there hate of the U.S., and I would agree. People who actually meet I have some of my closest friends are Russian, and they're dear people to my heart. We spread our own disinformation according to Paul. We can 10,000% agree on something. Matt and Paul typically, Jack, argue with each other in the comment section. And it's like, no, you go first. No, you go first. Today they agree. I guess your presence has brought forth some sort of peace overture to the show today. Veronique asked about pure and simple hacking skills from a Russian perspective.
Well, they're good at this stuff. They really are. And you know, I don't know. I don't have the personal experience, but I still am pretty well wired in the community, James, where you operate cybersecurity. And you know, and I've been to a couple of conferences where there were governmental speakers who revealed some of the things that are fundamentally not accessible to public knowledge. They clearly are very good at this, and don't believe we're not.
Yeah, I would say the same. Don't believe we're not. There's cyber attacks that go on in Russia all the time, but we just don't hear about it because, again, like we didn't hear anything about COVID in Russia. You're not going to hear anything about successful cyber attacks that go on within the Russia. You know, Putin wouldn't take his entire country offline to an internal Ethernet if they weren't going through massive cybersecurity incidents within the Russian. Like, you have to understand Putin's mindset. But if you understand Putin's mindset, he's a chess player, he's a strategist, he's a former peer of Jack's over at the KGB. Did you ever meet him, like when you guys were at the KGB?
No, he operated in the city of Dresden, which wasn't that far away from where I grew up. But when he was there, I was already in the U.S. And the legend that he built around himself, that he was such a great masterful spy, it's a bunch of baloney. He was a mid-level bureaucrat in an outpost where there was no action. Fundamentally.
So talking about masterful spies, what about Kim Philby? Did you ever meet him or work with?
Oh no, he was still alive. He was still alive when I was in Moscow. The Russians didn't trust him.
No kidding. That's really interesting to hear.
His apartment was bugged. They were paranoid because, you know, he operated as a double agent.
When he came back,
maybe he could have been triple.
Yeah.
But you know who they did trust? Morris and Lana Cohen. They were atomic spies and managed to flee before they were caught, like the Rosenbergs. They would have been executed also.
No
and
kidding.
They spent their remaining like 15 years in Moscow after a stint as spies in England. But they worked with me. I had contact with them. And they were, like, to their dying days, they were ardent communists. It was totally amazing. Really good people. And this is my prime example how the best of people can do a lot of damage based on false ideology and false beliefs.
Of course. Well, and for the audience, Kim Philby was, so we understand, a double agent, a Russian spy, worked at MI6, actually damaged US and UK intelligence relationships still to this day. There's, I think, an understandable amount of distrust from the US to the UK, because in the UK, I think this guy got to number 2, or was he at the head of MI6?
He was in charge of anti-Soviet operations. And so every time his department concocted something, he sent the information to the KGB, and the MI6 was scratching their head why nothing ever succeeded. They had some kind of an invasion in Albania planned, and as the Albanian and the nationals that lived abroad marched into the country, they were all they were intercepted right away. So this is what Philby did: phenomenal damage. The funny thing is that he was suspected because he was one of 5 ex-Cambridge students, but the British government was afraid to arrest him and put him on a trial because they were afraid of what else might come out. There's a great book that's written by a fellow named Ben McIntyre. It came out about maybe a year ago, sold about 1 million copies. It's called The Spy and the Traitor. That's not where. No, the Philby book is older. It's called A Spy Among Friends. It's a phenomenal, great biography of Kim Philby.
So, and Atali says, interesting, we had a stamp for Kim Philby. Actually, that was posted by Soviet Post. I remember he got some awards as well. Yeah, yes. I mean, you have to remember, if they don't trust you, they're still going to lift you up publicly.
You bet.
Because they want more people to do what Kim Philby did, right? And they want to make you a national folk hero because they want to go after the agents in those agencies that have the hero syndrome and be able to recruit them. I mean, that's how these agencies target double agents, right? That's how you find the guy who has that hero syndrome, the guy who wants the notoriety. He's not only doing it for patriotism, he's also doing it for personal me.
Ego is a big one. And with Philby, it certainly wasn't money. He was upper class. He went to Cambridge. But here's an interesting anecdote. When he wound up in Moscow, he was extremely disappointed that he didn't have a military rank. They didn't give him one because he wasn't a Russian. I didn't get one either, by the way. So who cares? But what they did for him, he was a heavy drinker, very heavy drinker. What they did for him, they provided him with a companion, a attractive Russian woman who pretty much became, I don't know if they got married, but she acted like a wife and she took care of the guy.
That's his reward, huh?
Yeah, in Russia, they know very well how to pair you with one of the most beautiful. Like, I remember my first time in Moscow, Jack. I'm walking down the street, and every girl that walks by me is a Vogue cover model. And I'm like, and none of the Russian men even look at him, right? They're like, she's average. And you're like, she's average.
Brought the American. He's turning.
She's average. Listen, man, I don't look Russian, all right? I could never mix in Russia. They knew I was a foreigner. Some people thought I was like Western Ukrainian, because Western Ukraine, like borders different parts of Europe where people's skins are a little bit darker. So when people heard me speak Russian a little bit there, because I have a little accent, they thought I was like Western Ukrainian in some cases.
I would have guessed Turkish.
Yeah, so someone said like Southern Ukrainian, like you're by Odessa, by the Black Sea, whatever that is. Yeah.
Should we tag team some comments, James? There's a whole bunch that came through. And
we have a ton of comments. I don't know where to get started. So I'm going to start picking and choosing. If I don't call out your comments, folks, I do apologize. I know, but we're almost near the end of the show, and I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So all the critical thinking stuff. I'll address Veronique's question about hacking here, which Matt answered. Hacking is done every day by everyone. If you mean threat actors with purpose driven towards the benefit of one nation state or the detriment of another, yes, we're always hacking all the time. And Jack was so kind to say, don't think that we're not doing it either. Anatoly says, you got to pay the piper if you live in Russia and make their money there. You do. All the
Probably
oligarchs.
To do with the oligarchs, exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anatoly. Yeah.
Anatoly also adds that it's easy to manufacture a prosecution in Russia for any reason if you don't play ball. That is actually very true, because there was a case a few years ago where an American-Israeli girl who was connecting through Moscow on her way back from India was caught with a joint in her checked luggage. She had a simple joint. Apparently, she forgot to check her luggage. You know, you go to India for 3 months and you smoke a bunch of pot, and your bag is essentially a huge duffel. You check it in. Russian got it through, recognized, arrested her, and sentenced her to 10 years in jail for having a joint.
Wow. Poor girl.
But she was used in negotiations. She was actually a pawn in a greater game because Russia needed something from Israel, and Israel wasn't going to give it. And she ended up getting released because two things. One, Israel bought 2 million Sputnik V doses to give to Syrian people in Syria. True story.
No kidding. Yeah, this is
right. And the U.S. did something on their side. It was like a triplet deal, kind of like a three-way trade, where they got this Israeli-American girl back to Israel to her family. The U.S. got something they needed from Russia. Russia got something they needed from Israel.
It's like Napoleon said.
Well, the other part of that deal, the unspoken part of that deal, by the way, and this has been told to me by very, very reliable people, was that part of the buying of the 2 million doses for Syria was also that Russia would no longer use their S-400 missile defense system against Israeli warplanes as to bomb Iranian targets in Syria.
Wow.
Napoleon said, we are all of us kings and pawns. Just depends where you are in the game.
Right.
Much Matt saying, polarizing our bipartisan mentalities is the best method to, tear a cell apart. Right. Yeah, from our previous comments there.
So let's see. Germans have a deep distrust of government.
No,
Jack.
It's exactly the opposite. Germany was founded by the Prussian military. They unified a whole lot of little states, and there's a militaristic style discipline still in the German genetic makeup. There may be some that trust government, but I've gone back and I shake my head and says, oh my God, they don't know the meaning of the word freedom.
No, but Russians understand the word privacy, I think, better than anyone else does.
Really?
Russians?
No, Germans. I'm sorry. Did I say Russians?
Germans. No.
Yes.
That's a good point. Absolutely. I agree with that.
Anatoly clarifies the Sputnik V is the viral vector. I love the fact that we have Anatoly here. Paul talks about temporary peace with Matt. Fascinating conversation by Paul. I don't have anything pithy to say.
Yeah.
Patrick says, what about Anna Chapman?
Yeah, what about her? You know, she was one of the many that come over here and do work on sort of voluntary work on behalf of the FSB. as opposed to sending a lot of trained agents here, they use people who come here and can hopefully for them help them do some damage. That's because they're not unlike the KGB. The Russian intelligence today is not afraid of people getting caught. They actually think it's a good thing because, boo-hoo, if we catch one, there could be 100 more, right? And the others, they don't have enough money to and time to train people well.
Jack, I'm busting to ask you about Edward Snowden. As a guest of Mother Russia, and the claim is he was on his way to Latin America and he got stopped. I think Biden made a phone call when he was VP, that I believe. He got stopped in Russia. Now he's a guest of Mother Russia. Surely he's not staying there free of charge. Surely they're asking something of him, information. What do you think?
Yeah, well, Snowden, a lot of people think that he's a hero, and I disagree with that. He could have really turned whistleblower instead of, freely giving away state secrets.
I'm with you on that, man. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I just want to say this. I'm going to give ES the chance to maybe fix his reputation on the show at some point in the near future. But I will say that what Snowden did, he's not a hero. He should have taken the full whistleblower, gone to jail for 10 years, came out.
Yeah, I agree. But what I want to know is if as a guest of Mother Russia, he's not staying there for free. What are they getting from him?
Well, he doesn't have the means to get new information, does he? He's maybe he's a part of their propaganda because there's a lot of people who believe in him. And as long as he's in the limelight, there's the anarchist part of the population that believe in him 100%.
Yeah.
Well, right. and you have to understand, if you watch Snowden like YouTube videos, they garner hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of views, right, when he does different shows.
Yeah.
But I will say this: Snowden is in Russia. He has nothing to offer, but he is, like Jack said, part of the Russian propaganda. He's also an excellent kind of teacher of the skills the NSA has for their own employees. Okay. So don't be, when you see the Russian capabilities since Snowden really grow, don't discount the fact that Snowden could have been in a room with a bunch of the folks over from some of the Russian cyber teams talking about some of the reverse engineering skills that he learned at the NSA.
100%,
and some of the TTPs. So the NSA, like an adversary, has TTPs. U.S. Cyber Command, like an adversary, has TTPs. And so don't be surprised if those TTPs and the ineffectiveness of the U.S. maybe in the year or two post the Snowden debacle to be able to do a lot from a cyber perspective, because once someone knows how you operate, they have your playbook. He shared that, and I think that's the value that he brought to Russia beyond the propaganda machine.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that applies to regular spies when they turn. The FBI was very much interested in what I could tell them about methods of operation, the tradecraft and so forth. That was important to them, even though it was a bit dated. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, but dated is the foundation. Matt talks about the tribal knowledge plus the skills. He's still got value for him. Paul says, agree, Matt. He's going through the archives and putting things in a clearer picture for him. Anatoly says they let him exit Hong Kong after he gave up all the info. Hong Kong didn't stop him. From Hong Kong, he was supposed to go, I believe, Caracas, Venezuela.
That's what I heard. That's what Ben Greenwald says, yeah.
Right. And he was supposed to go to Caracas, but it's a good thing he didn't go to Caracas. They're eating dogs in the streets. There's starvation there. The guy wouldn't have been, he would have been like, take me to Guantanamo. I'd rather be in Guantanamo for 10 years than be in Caracas, Venezuela. Yeah. The Russians swooped in because the Russians used some diplomatic leverage on Hong Kong to get him out. And they got some support from China, I believe. It's very interesting because when our SR-7 and not our SR, we had the drone that fell in Iran during the Obama years that fell on the border of Afghanistan and Iran, and Obama left it there, and they didn't think that much was left out of that drone, but that drone was duplicated and reverse engineered by three countries.
Yeah.
Iran, Russia, China, who all had experts essentially studying the makeup of our most advanced drone. It was the Reaper, I believe, at the time. Wow. So don't for one second think that Russia doesn't cooperate with regional. But so let me ask you one final question here, because my wife's in Israel at the moment. If a lot of people don't know, of taking the Israeli flag right next to the American flag up until Israel is able to take down the enemy in Hamas. But Russia has a lot of interest in Iran. What's Russia's interest in Iran? Do you know, Jack?
That's above my pay grade. I don't want to speculate. I've said a lot of things where I'm pretty firm that I can contribute, but this one I don't have a clue. It's just creating more trouble.
That to me is very fascinating. The Russian interest in Iran. Before President Trump took out Soleimani, Soleimani was a regular guest in the Kremlin and was actually hired Russian hackers to come in and teach the Iranian state-backed APTs how to use specific tools, do some reverse engineering, and so forth. To me, it's always been fascinating. I got to find someone who can talk about this stuff.
All I can say is watch out who you go to bed with. They just might wind up performing a bebectomy on you. because the Russian state is anti-Islam, and they have with the Chechnya or whatever this
that is
Chechnya, the region of Russia,
and they can. These are just probably they're allied because they have a common enemy, but God forbid the common enemy goes, they go at each other.
Yeah,
absolutely. We're at the end of our show. I want to thank Jack for coming on today. Jack, really, we do appreciate you.
Thanks, man.
Taking time, and you've got an open invite to always come on the show. I don't think anyone will object to having you on. I think I'm going to get some hate messages here in a second when we end. Like, why could you guys go longer? But there's stuff going on. I believe that next week when we do the show, I will be in Israel. I am going to move up my based on everything that's going on. Please pray for Israel and the people there. Over 1,100 rockets in less than 36 hours. A 6-year-old young boy had a missile hit his bedroom and he passed away. Just a few hours ago. A young 6-year-old boy has lost his life. Yesterday, a mother and her daughter, a father and his daughter lost their lives, Arab Israelis, by a Hamas missile. Hamas does not discriminate when they launch their missiles. They're launching them at a population area. They're not launching them at military bases. They're not launching them against, law enforcement targets or government targets. They're launching them into really populated areas. And so take some time, pray for the people in Israel. I know, Eddie, you have a ton of colleagues in Israel that are spent last night, like me, unable to sleep because
and in shelters.
My phone gets red alerts. And as we're speaking, in the last hour, there's been over 150 red alerts in Israel.
I've been getting texts from my colleagues over there that are in shelters with their kids sleeping on the floor and blankets. It's very tense right now. So look, James, good luck, man. All the best to you and your wife. Be safe. Let us know what we can do. Jack, amazing. Like, what a wealth of knowledge you are. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for kind of waving the flag, with us. And we love our brothers and sisters in Russia. It's the politicians that screw it up for us. And we'll try our best to hold them all accountable, right?
We need to elect better politicians. We need to elect better politicians.
It's our own politicians that screw us also. So
that's right.
Yeah,
exactly.
I agree.
Yeah,
I absolutely agree. Jack, thank you so much. Folks,
welcome.
Eddie and I, make sure to go contribute to the Tiltify Wounded Warrior Project. This is going to be the last week I run this campaign ahead of Memorial Weekend. Once we get into Memorial Weekend and going into the summer, we're going to do a Gold Star fundraiser for Gold Star families and kids of Gold Star families to give them cybersecurity scholarships. And it's something that we're going to do long term. It's going to be something that we're going to do donation campaigns, and a bunch of other podcasts are going to join this one. So, we do want to to help the Gold Star families as much as humanly possible. They've paid the ultimate sacrifice, and so we want to give them a little bit of support. Tomorrow morning, I'll have the other side of cyber right here at 7 a.m. and then at 9 a.m. I'll be live with the practitioner brief as we wrap up this week. So stay tuned to that. And on Friday, Eddie and I will have a surprise for all of you. We might be in person on Friday, right, Eddie?
Beautiful. That's right. Exactly. That'll be fun.
Yeah. It'll be my first time, by the way, for
That's
people
right.
here. It'll be my first time actually having coffee with Eddie or a beer.
I feel like
or
we're
scotch.
brothers.
Don't forget to double mask.
Oh yeah, I will be triple masking, and anything Fauci says I will do. If Fauci wants my hair sample, he can get it.
All right,
folks. Thanks again. It's been a pleasure having you all here tonight.
Godspeed. Be well.
Good night, ladies
Yes,
and gentlemen.
yes.
Be safe, everybody. Thank you, Jack.
I've been in worse places than Hamas missiles. I promise you that. And
Wow.
and there's nothing those missiles can do to me. But I am going to go and support my wife and her family at their time of need. So, folks, that's it for us here tonight. Have a great night. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast, and go connect with Jack on LinkedIn. Jack is a blast, and we'll have more stuff with Jack coming through in the near future as well. So, Godspeed, everyone. Have a good night and stay safe.
Take
Cheers.
care. Bye.